Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. Grab your drink, silence your phone, and listen closely. This one starts with a shattered glass and ends with something a whole lot messier. The first time I realized something was wrong was when I noticed the napkins were red. Not white, not gold like the invitations, but red, deep, saturated, deliberate red. Like someone wanted to remind us all night that this party was dipped in danger. It was my wife's company holiday party. Her firm had rented out the entire rooftop of a five-star hotel. There were string lights overhead, candles at every table, a jazz trio performing some melancholic Sinatra in the background. Everything felt too perfect, too polished, like a trap that smelled like champagne. Kennedy, my wife, had insisted I come. Just this once, she said weeks ago, practically begging me to show up and be part of her world. So I did, like a good husband, like a fool. The wine was bottomless. I took one sip and regretted it. Too sweet, too bitter, couldn't tell which, just like everything else that night. I remember standing near a table of appetizers no one was touching, fiddling with a toothpick, when I first noticed him. Not by name, I didn't know it then, but by the way he laughed. Not a full laugh, a restrained snort, a smug, cocky sound meant for only one person in the room to hear. My wife. He was watching her. Not just watching, surveying. With that kind of self-assured smirk that said, "I've been there, you haven't." And Kennedy? She smiled back like they were trading a secret across the room. I didn't breathe for a full 30 seconds. Someone bumped into me with a tray of shrimp skewers and I almost dropped my glass. I looked down. Red wine on a red napkin. No one would have seen the stain. I could have bled out and the linen would hide it perfectly. Eventually, I made my way over to Kennedy. She was mid-conversation, but she didn't stop to introduce me. Not even a glance. So I stood there, invisible, while her coworker kept talking. Roman. That was his name. I caught it in passing from someone else later. Roman was everything I wasn't. Relaxed, stylish, loud in a way people respected. He used his hands too much when he spoke, and somehow it didn't look ridiculous. It looked confident, like the kind of man who walks into a room and already knows he belongs. "I heard the pitch was your idea," he told her. "Only part of it," she said, biting her lip. "You never give yourself enough credit." Then he leaned in and whispered something I couldn't hear. She laughed, loud. That laugh used to be mine. I finally spoke up. Said something stupid like, "Ken, want to get some air?" She blinked at me like I'd interrupted a monologue, then smiled politely. "In a bit, babe. Babe." The word dropped between us like a dead bird. Roman gave me one quick look. Down. Like sizing up an opponent in a game I didn't know we were playing. "You married her?" he asked. Before I could answer, he turned back to her and said, loudly, for me to hear, "You don't look like the type who settles." I choked on nothing. My throat just collapsed. She didn't defend me. She didn't say a word. The jazz trio switched to a slower tune. People began dancing. But my wife walked away with him. Just a step or two. But enough. Enough for my chest to feel like it cracked open. I didn't go after them. I just stood there, holding a glass, on a rooftop, with a red napkin crumpled in my fist, and a sinking feeling in my gut that this wasn't the first time he'd said something like that to her. It definitely wasn't the last. And the worst part? That was only the first hour of the party. The night should have ended there. I should have gone home, should have made some excuse, grabbed my coat, and disappeared into the streetlights like a man with an ounce of dignity. But I didn't. I stood there like a prop, like a forgotten coat rack in a corner no one visits twice. Kennedy and Roman danced. I watched. She wasn't even a great dancer. Not like she used to be when it was just us in the kitchen, spinning barefoot to silly songs while pasta boiled. But with him, she moved like she'd been waiting all year for that song to play. Their bodies weren't pressed too close, not yet, but the intent was unmistakable. It was emotional infidelity choreographed to a jazz cover of The Way You Look Tonight. I tried to blend into the crowd. I circled the room pretending to text. Even though the screen just showed a blank note I kept rewriting, deleting, rewriting again. I typed, "I think she's cheating," into the blank space and immediately erased it. I wasn't ready to say it. Not even to myself. About an hour later, I caught sight of Kennedy again. This time at the bar. She was laughing again. And her hand was resting lightly on Roman's chest. Just for a second. But that was all it took. He said something. She leaned in. Then, without thinking, without hesitation, he reached for her hand. Not aggressively. Not forcefully. Just like he'd done it before. And she let him. It wasn't a handshake. It wasn't a joke. It was soft. Intimate. Familiar. Then Roman kissed her hand. Yes, actually kissed it. And walked away without even glancing in my direction. Kennedy turned slightly and scanned the room. And I swear, for half a breath, she looked nervous. She was searching for me. Maybe to see if I'd seen. Maybe to lie if I had. But I didn't confront her. I didn't storm over. I didn't throw a drink like some cliché movie scene. Instead, I walked calmly toward the back staircase. My hands were shaking, but my face was calm. I took the stairs 2 at a time until I found a service hallway that led to the employee bathrooms. I locked myself in the last stall and sat down, fully clothed, like a man who just got told his entire life was someone else's inside joke. I stayed in that stall for 27 minutes. When I came back upstairs, she was gone. Just gone. Her coat was missing. Her wineglass, the one with the lipstick smudge, was gone too. I asked a server if he'd seen the woman in the black dress with the red lipstick. He shrugged. "She left about 10 minutes ago," he said, "with the guy in the gray suit." Roman. I wanted to vomit. Instead, I stood there, dumbfounded, with a melting ice cube in my untouched drink, and a room full of strangers congratulating themselves on successful quarters and marketing campaigns, while my marriage collapsed between sips of wine and clinking glasses. That's when I finally sent the text. Not to Kennedy. Not to Roman. To myself. I typed, "You're not paranoid. You're just the last to know." Then I pressed send. And I didn't go home. Not that night. Not for a while. I didn't go home that night. Couldn't. I sat in my car for hours, engine off, lights out, parked on a side street 2 blocks from the venue. I didn't cry, though I thought I would. I just sat there, hands gripped on the steering wheel like I was afraid I'd float away if I let go. Around 3 a.m. I checked my phone. No texts from Kennedy. Not even the courtesy, "Where are you?" Or, "Did you leave?" I wasn't a thought in her mind. When I finally did start the car, I didn't head toward our house. I drove to an old 24-hour diner I used to visit during college. I hadn't been there in over a decade, but the booths were the same. Cracked leather, sticky sugar containers, and a jukebox no one touched anymore. I ordered black coffee and stared at my reflection in the window until the sky began to soften. I don't know what I was expecting when I got home just after sunrise. Maybe guilt. Maybe an apology. Maybe the sickening smell of him still lingering. But the house was still. Her shoes were by the door. Her keys on the counter. Her perfume, faint but present, still hung in the hallway. I walked into our bedroom. She was there, sleeping, peacefully, on her side of the bed. She never asked where I'd been. Instead, that afternoon, she acted like nothing had happened. She made avocado toast, scrolled through her phone, laughed at videos like the night before never existed. I watched her from across the kitchen island like she was a stranger in my house. Later that evening, while she was showering, I noticed her phone buzzing on the table. Normally, I never check her phone. I'm not proud of what I did, but something had cracked inside me, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I picked it up. Notifications were off, but the lock screen showed a preview. Roman. Last night was worth it. Still thinking about that laugh. My throat went dry. My finger hovered over the screen, trembling. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The text was enough. The message that wasn't meant for me had spoken louder than anything she ever would. I placed the phone back exactly where I found it, sat down on the couch, and stared at the muted TV for hours. She came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, kissed my cheek like she always did, and asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I nodded. But I wasn't watching the screen. I was watching her. Everything, her smile, her gestures, the way she tucked her feet under her. It all felt rehearsed now, like a performance. And I was sitting front row, the only one who knew the truth behind the curtain. And the worst part? I still couldn't bring myself to ask her. Not yet, but I was getting close. The silence between us grew louder each day. Not the kind you notice immediately, but the creeping, heavy kind that settles into the walls like mold. I still hadn't mentioned the message from Roman. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, but really, I was afraid. Afraid of what she'd say, or worse, what she wouldn't deny. I played the same scene in my head 1,000 times. Me confronting her, her gasping in guilt, tears, maybe apologies. But the real Kennedy, she didn't cry easily. She didn't shatter. She calcified. A week later, something strange happened. I came home early from work. A rare early day, thanks to a canceled client meeting. Kennedy didn't expect me, and when I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was a jacket on the coat rack. A man's jacket, not mine. It wasn't obvious at first. She often wore oversized coats. Fashion, she always said. But this wasn't hers. It was tailored, masculine, with a label that screamed money. I reached for it like it might bite. Inside the collar, a name tag stitched in cursive, Roman H. For a full minute, I stood there, holding it, hearing nothing but the ticking of the hallway clock. My chest buzzed with the kind of fury that doesn't explode. It simmers. When I heard footsteps upstairs, I quietly placed the jacket back exactly where I found it and walked toward the kitchen like I hadn't seen anything. She came downstairs a moment later, hair still damp, phone in hand, and stopped short when she saw me. "You're home early," she said, trying too hard to sound casual. "Yeah, lucky me." She walked over and kissed my cheek. Her lips were cold. I asked her what she'd been up to. She said laundry and just catching up on work. She didn't mention anyone else being there. She didn't ask if I'd seen anything unusual. She didn't have to. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were listening. I wanted to say something, to shout, demand, accuse. But I smiled instead. I pretended, because I wanted to know how far she'd go. I wanted to see how deep the lie ran. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted her to feel safe for one more night so she'd slip up on her own. Later that evening, while she showered again, the jacket was gone. I never saw it after that. But I remembered the weight of it in my hands. The stitching, the scent of cologne I didn't own. And I knew, with sick certainty, that I wasn't imagining any of this. The game had started, and I was done playing fair. It's amazing how quickly lies begin to rot. At first, they're polished, controlled, clean enough to pass for truth. But then time presses down. The edges fray. You notice things, small things, and once you do, you can't unnotice them. Kennedy had always been careful. She scheduled her days like blueprints with zero room for improvisation. But lately, things didn't add up, not in obvious ways, just hairline fractures. The biggest crack came on a Wednesday. She told me she had a late client dinner downtown. She even showed me the reservation on her phone. Some high-end sushi place we could never afford without a business excuse. I nodded, didn't argue, said I hoped it went well. She kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong. But I remembered something she didn't. That same day, Roman had posted a story on his social media. A photo of 2 cocktails in a dimly lit lounge, followed by a mirror selfie in what looked like a luxury hotel hallway. I wouldn't have seen it. I don't follow him, but a friend of mine, someone who once worked in Kennedy's building, messaged me with a casual, "Hey, isn't this your wife's coworker?" He'd seen Roman's story too, and he'd noticed something else. In the background of one photo, a woman in a black coat with gold buttons walked slightly ahead of Roman. The image was blurry, but I knew that coat. I'd bought it for Kennedy last Christmas. The buttons were antique brass, custom stitched. No one else had that design. I saved the photo without reacting. That night, when Kennedy came home just after 11, she smelled like citrus and wood, a scent I didn't recognize. I asked how dinner went. She said fine. Nothing memorable. Just shop talk and overpriced seaweed. She joked. She didn't know I'd seen the photo. Didn't know someone else had, too. She didn't know I was starting to document everything. That's when something inside me shifted. I stopped being her husband and started being her observer. I took mental notes, timestamps, screenshots. I stopped arguing, stopped asking. I smiled when I needed to, laughed when expected. But I wasn't on the same page anymore. I was writing my own version, quietly, carefully. She forgot what I never stopped remembering. That I wasn't stupid. I was just slow to admit the truth. But now that I was done pretending not to see. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more. Not because I doubted what was happening. No, I'd seen enough. But because I wanted to know how far she'd go. What she'd risk. How bold the lies could become when she thought the world still believed her. I think that's what broke me the most. Not the betrayal itself, but how easy it was for her to look me in the face and spin a story, knowing I'd nod and smile like the good, dumb husband. A few nights later, she left for what she called a girls' spa weekend. 2 days at some lodge in the hills. She packed light, too light. No skincare kits, no books, no oversized sweatshirt she always wore to sleep. Just 2 small bags and a barely zipped smile. I offered to drive her, but she declined. "Tasha's picking me up," she said, kissing my cheek. "Go enjoy the peace and quiet." Tasha, I later confirmed, was in Miami with her sister that entire weekend. She didn't even bother checking the details. I waited 6 hours before I left the house. Drove out of town, took side streets, stayed under the radar. I wasn't following her, not directly. I wasn't that reckless. Instead, I booked a room at the same resort, under a fake name. I knew which one it was from her email. She'd forwarded the reservation to herself and left the tab open once. Just like that, I had the name, the dates, everything. When I checked in, I asked casually, "Does my wife happen to be staying here already?" "Kennedy." The receptionist smiled and said, "Ah, yes. She and Mr. Halden checked in earlier this afternoon." Mr. Halden. Roman. I didn't flinch. I went to my room, closed the curtains, and sat there in the dark. I didn't move for hours. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just existed. Every few minutes I'd hear footsteps in the hallway and wonder if it was them. If they'd walk past. If they'd recognize me. I both dreaded and hoped for it. They never did. But around midnight, I stepped into the hallway. Just to breathe. Just to confirm that they were real, not ghosts in my head. Room 214. I knew it from the logbook at the front desk. I stopped in front of it. No sounds. No voices. Just the soft hum of the air conditioning behind the door. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. I just stood there. And for the first time in my life, I felt what it was like to be completely erased. Replaced. Ignored. Rewritten in someone else's story like I had never mattered. She wasn't just lying anymore. She was building a life without me, while I was still alive to watch. I didn't knock on their door that night. I didn't want a confrontation, not yet. I wasn't there to shout or scream or catch them in some tragic scene. I was done begging for truth. What I wanted now was silence. Power in the quiet. The kind that doesn't explode, but echoes. Before sunrise, I checked out of the hotel. No noise. No questions. I left behind a plain white envelope at the front desk with Kennedy's full name, written in soft black ink. I didn't include a note. Just a photo. The blurry image Roman posted from the hallway with her unmistakable coat. And a printout of her reservation confirmation, with her name and his, side by side. I left it to her imagination what I knew. The lack of explanation would make her wonder just how much I had seen, how long I'd been watching. Back home, I cleaned. Not just the house, everything. The bookmarks in my browser. The framed photos. The password to our shared streaming account. I wiped traces of us from my side of the world. Every click, every drawer, every routine we used to share. I took it apart piece by piece. And then I waited. She returned on Sunday night, exactly at 8:42 p.m. I watched from the window as her car pulled into the driveway. She sat there for a while, staring at the steering wheel like it had betrayed her. Then she walked inside. Her face was paler than usual, her shoulders tighter, She said nothing about the spa. No fake story. No invented laughter. She just said, "Hey," and went upstairs. I followed 20 minutes later. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, hair still curled, makeup faded but intact. The envelope was in her lap. She didn't ask how I got it. Didn't ask how long I'd known. She just said, "I didn't expect that from you." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "It's not what it looks like." Not even denial. Just that flat, almost impressed statement, like I had finally stepped out of the role she'd written for me. I stood there in the doorway and replied, "Neither did I." She stared at me like she was searching for the old version of me, the one who would forgive, the one who would cry and beg and stay anyway. But he was gone. We didn't speak for the rest of the night. We didn't sleep. We didn't touch. She stayed on her side. I stayed on mine. And in that cold, terrifying stillness, I realized something that I never thought would come. I didn't want her to explain. I wanted her to wonder what I'd do next. The next morning, I woke up before she did. The sun was just starting to cut across the hardwood floor like a clean blade, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own life. Kennedy was still asleep, or pretending to be. Either way, I didn't care. I got dressed quietly, packed a duffel bag, and walked through the house like it was a museum of someone else's memories. Her heels by the door, her mug on the counter, the framed vacation photo from years ago, the one we used to laugh at. I didn't take anything I didn't need. No yelling, no closure speech, just one letter on the kitchen table. I didn't write a list of her lies. I didn't print screenshots. I didn't mention Roman's name. I simply told her the truth. That I knew, that I'd known for a long time, and that I was done participating in a life where I was merely tolerated. I wrote that I hoped she found what she was looking for, because I was going to do the same. For once, I wasn't walking away in shame. I was walking toward something better. I moved into a small apartment a few towns over. Nothing special, but it was mine. Quiet, peaceful. I started painting again. Something I hadn't done since college. I reconnected with old friends I'd drifted from while orbiting her life. I even joined a book club of all things. Just a handful of strangers, coffee, and stories that didn't end in betrayal. She emailed me 2 weeks later. 3 lines. "You didn't deserve that. I don't know who I am anymore. Please, can we talk?" I didn't reply. Not because I hated her. Not even out of anger. But because sometimes healing means not looking back. Not dragging broken glass through the doorway just because it used to be part of your home. I forgave her. Quietly. Alone. And then I let her go. So, if you're watching this right now wondering whether it's too late to take your life back, it's not. You don't need to win the argument. You just need to reclaim your peace. Not all endings are disasters. Some are just overdue beginnings. Thanks for watching Reddit Confessions. If you've ever lived through something that felt like the end, but turned into a new chapter, tell us about it in the comments. Share a moment in history that changed you forever. We'd love to hear your story, and we'll be right here with the next one.